I want to thank you again for coming and participating in this series that we're doing on Genesis 1 through 11. We left off at the period of time between the fall of man in Genesis 3, and we finished up in 5 and 11 with the genealogies. Today we're going on to look at the flood of Noah. God created two creatures in his image. One is angels and men. Angels appear to be created before man. Satan was created, we know, as a perfect creature because he's there at the temptation of Adam and Eve. So we know from Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 that he was created perfect in the original. However, by the time he comes to the temptation of Eve and then Adam, he's a fallen creature. Angels are spiritual. They're not made of matter or energy as our physical realm is. They're immortal. They never age. Gabriel, for instance, one of the angels, appears to Daniel in the book of Daniel, and he appears 600 years later to Mary, the mother of Jesus, and he's the same creature. He hasn't aged at all. So we know that the angels don't age. However, some of them have fallen into sin, as we have pointed out with Satan, is at least one of them. And his angels are talked about as having fallen too, those that obeyed him and fell with him. However, with their sin, there is no redemption to undo this sin. There's no atonement, even by the angel of God, who is evidently a pre-incarnate Christ. He appears periodically in the scriptures. He's not like the other angels. He allows himself to be worshiped. But this angel of God can't die either, because the angels can't die. And the penalty for sin is death. And so there's no possibility of redemption for the angels. They have the lake of fire. We know from Christ in Matthew 25 that according to Jesus, their ultimate destiny is the lake of fire, which has no occupants at the present time. They're masculine in gender. They always appear as masculine with masculine pronouns. There are no female angels. There's no marriage between angels, and they don't procreate to produce baby angels, contrary to the pictures you often see of cherubs. Cherubs are a different creature, special type of angels. These angels interact with God. You see this in the case of Job, at the beginning of Job, when the sons of God appear before God, Satan is among them. These are not the spirit of departed people that are coming before God's presence, and they interact with God, and they accuse believers before the throne of God. Satan does day and night. You also have the case where Ahab was to be led up to die at Ramoth Gilead, and God has a convocation of spirits, and part of these are unfallen angels, and part of them are fallen angels. So in this case, there's an interaction and feedback between God and his angels. They can also, in the present day, possess people, because we have them appearing in the New Testament, in Christ casting them out as demons or unclean spirits. These are obviously servants of Satan and his angels, and they indwell people and possess them. Judas, for instance, is indwelt by Satan in the temptation and leading to the death of Christ. Men, in contrast to angels, are mortals. They, as we have seen from Adam and Eve, are sinful and have fallen. And there's a redemption, however, for men, and that's done by Christ. Men, in contrast to angels, are mortals. They have sinned, in the case of Adam and Eve, and fallen, but they're redeemed by the God-man, Christ Jesus. They're created in two parts, men are. In contrast to angels, there's masculine and feminine union that happens between males and females, and they produce babies in this union. It's forbidden for men to participate in homosexuality, men with men and women with women. It wasn't Adam and another man, and it wasn't Eve and another woman. But God made this union of marriage between them in two parts, probably in some reflection of his nature that exists a fellowship in the Godhead between the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. It's not a carnal union as you have with humans, but it's a similarity where there's a fellowship between man and a woman. As we've mentioned, it's forbidden to have homosexual or bestiality relationships with animals. It's forbidden. Before the fall, you have a perfect relationship between God and man, a perfect universe as we've seen he created in Genesis 1 and 2. However, the entrance of the fallen angels, who are also created in God's image, in the case of Satan, caused man to fall from his relationship with God. So this interaction between the angels and men, both created in the image of God, leads to a catastrophic failure on man's part and in God's judgment to bring the whole universe down. We see, though, even in this relationship that man has lost with God, the universe is caught in the problem of sin and corruption. But the world that was still after the fall, even though there's the Garden of Eden and it's guarded by a cherub with a sword so they can't enter it, the rest of the world is very lush. It's full of animal and plant life. It's a very beautiful place. It had a uniform temperature. You didn't need clothes, but clothes were worn to cover the nakedness of man. But it was a very warm and lush environment. Man had almost an ideal condition compared to what we have today. And this continued from the fall until Noah. However, a problem began to develop in man. Now, men had known, because of the longevity, Adam lived to the time of Lamech, who is the grandfather of Noah, which meant that everyone, for all these generations, knew what had taken place in the Garden of Eden. They knew the problem of sin. However, they were not paying attention during this period of time. They were enjoying this luxurious thing, eating, drinking, and having a great time. However, their sin began to develop. And this is characteristic of man. He has good environments, and what does he do with them? You see it in Israel. You see it in man after the flood of Noah, where they have a good environment. However, this materialism, the enjoying of the senses, the food and everything, causes man to not trust in God and to turn away. In this environment that existed before the flood of Noah, in fact, it became bad. And we have, even before Noah, Enoch, a man of God who served God, who became a preacher, we know, and told them that judgment's coming for ungodly people who will suffer judgment. And in the end, God took him out of the world. He was the first man to be translated. There's only two in history that we know of. Enoch, Elijah. Only two men have been translated. But he warned them, don't enjoy this world. Turn back to God. But that was not to be. Let's read in Genesis 6, 1 through 9. Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, the daughters were born to them. Okay, men begin to multiply. How did they multiply? By marriage between a man and a woman. Was there anything wrong with that? No, that was perfect. Daughters were born to them. In verse 2, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all that they chose. Now this term sons of God is used in the Old Testament, not of humans. It's generally used and almost exclusively of angels. So you have a strange thing occurring here. This marriage, you ask, what's the problem with a marriage between the sons of God and the daughters of men? God ordained marriage, but there's something unholy about this marriage. Because God then says in verse 3, and the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh. Yet his days will become 120 years. Why that's significant is up to this time, the longevity of man has been over 900 years old. They're going to be chopped down to 120 years. But there's more to this problem of why God is angry. There were giants on the earth in those days, and afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. And these are the mighty men of old, men of renown. What you have here is that coming out of this union between the sons of God and the daughters of men are offspring that are men of renown. They're giants. Nephilim is the term that's used. This union is the primary cause, it looks like, of God's anger. Then God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man, and he was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. So you have a state that God is very unhappy with his creation and what they've done. Is he angry that they married? No. But it's an unholy union that has taken place that's beyond what he's said. However, it says, there's a beautiful phrase here. It says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Enoch was not the only holy man. Noah, a descendant of his, is also a man who found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Now, I'd like to jump to a couple passages in the New Testament which explain exactly what this type of a union was that God was so angry with. In 2 Peter 2, verses 4 and 5, it says, for if God did not spare the angels who sinned, so he didn't spare these angels that sinned. What kind of sin is it? But cast them into hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment. Satan sinned, but was it of this kind that he was cast into chains and darkness? No, he's still free. Were the other angels free? Yes, they are. But there's a certain class of angels that were not free, that sinned of a kind that God was not happy and threw them in chains. But look at the contrast. But did not spare the ancient world. In other words, the time of the sin of these angels was during the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, a preacher of righteousness, it calls him, Noah, bringing the flood in the world on the ungodly. In other words, these angels sinned in the ancient world, but God preserves Noah out of this. Again, the very strong indication is here that these sons of God, these angels, had crossed the lines and gone after strange flesh. Angels don't marry with angels, but that does not preclude that masculine angels cannot have relationships with women and produce offspring. Jude is even more clear, 6 and 7, verse 6, and the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he is reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. And then he compares that. He talks about the same type of angel, the same group of angels that Peter's talked about, but he goes on. As Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them, listen to this, in similar manner to them. In similar manner to who? To the angels. Having given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh. Sodom and Gomorrah, in fact, our terms of sodomy laws have to do with homosexuality, crossing this line, not marriage of men and women, but homosexual relationships, and they gave themselves over to strange flesh. It says, in like manner to these angels, who also did the same thing, and are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. The sexual union of the sons of God, a term used, as I said, exclusively of angels in the Old Testament, such as in Job, and the daughters of men, this union with the daughters of men, is the point of God's wrath and his determination to destroy all of earth's animals, including all men except those of on Noah's ark. This sexual union was an unholy one, not the man-woman relationship ordained by God in Genesis 1 and 2. And it appears to be between masculine fallen angels and female women, according to Jude and 2 Peter. The punishment for the fallen angels who gave themselves over to sexual immorality and went after strange flesh is that they are now locked up in chains and darkness until the judgment of the great day. The product of this unholy union were Nephilim. This punishment of mankind and the offspring of this unholy union results in the destruction of the whole human race, except for Noah, who found grace in the eyes of the Lord.